It's a misnomer. Contrary to their ominous name, killer whales are actually quite friendly. And that's not all. In the last 30 years, we've learned orcas, as they're called, also are intelligent and deeply attached to their families. So attached, in fact, that killer whales do something virtually unheard of among animals of any kind. They stay with their mothers all their lives. Their families, or pods, are broken up only by death or capture, which is why there's a campaign to have a killer whale named Corky and others return to the wild. May sound like a great idea, but not everyone agrees. ABC's Judy Muller spoke to those on both sides of the Set Them Free debate.
Ladies and gentlemen, Shamu, the killer whale.
In San Diego, there is a daughter who has not seen her family for 24 years. Over 1,000 miles away in Canada, her family, who last saw her when she was abducted at the age of 4. This man has made it his life's work to reunite them.
It's not okay to take these animals away from their families and imprison them for our amusement. We don't need that.
This is the story of Corky, a female killer whale whose real-life dilemma has been thrust into the spotlight because of a make-believe story.
You go in circles?
Free Willy tells the tale of a young boy who befriends a captive killer whale, then helps him escape to his family, who live in the ocean just outside a fictional theme park.
The greatest adventure of the summer.
Corky, meanwhile, is one of the orcas playing the role of Shamu at SeaWorld. Unlike other aquariums, SeaWorld has successfully bred orcas in captivity, as seen in this memorable footage of another killer whale from 1991. Corky has not been so lucky. Since her capture in 1969, she has lost 6 babies. Those advocating her release believe Corky's offspring would have lived in the wild and that Corky herself would live longer if freed from captivity.
You know, SeaWorld has made enough money off of her. They've profited enough. It's time for them to return the favor and let her go back to her family.
Donna Hertel has organized an army of volunteers to leaflet moviegoers in 25 states.
You're going to free Corky.
Yeah.
An 800 number that appears at the end of the film has received 100,000 calls so far.
People are becoming aware of the plight of orcas in captivity, and they're becoming aware of the fact that these animals are dying to amuse us.
But Corky's caretakers at SeaWorld are opposed to her release.
I see an animal that's happy, and I see life in an oceanarium as not being bad, just different than life in the wild.
Jim McBain is Corky's doctor at SeaWorld. He says Corky has lived under the care of humans for too long to survive a return to the ocean.
It might be a great experiment, but as Corky's veterinarian and somebody that's known her for 6 years, I wouldn't really be interested in seeing her involved in the experiment.
Bottom line, you don't think Corky should be freed?
I think that it would be closer to a death sentence than freedom.
This is where Corky spent the first 4 years of her life, in the waters around Vancouver Island, in British Columbia, off Canada's west coast. SeaWorld says she's been gone too long to feel at home here again, but those pushing for her release say she would be happiest here, which raises a question. Do these animals really feel emotions, or do human beings impose their emotions on them, something called anthropomorphism?
To claim that Corky is happy at SeaWorld, to me, is the greatest anthropomorphic error of all time. How can they possibly know what is in Corky's mind?
For 22 years, behavioral scientist Paul Spong and his team of research volunteers have been watching every move the killer whales make in the waters around his island home. They have also been listening through a network of underwater microphones. They compile some 1,200 hours of taped orca conversation every year. His computer helps him identify different family groups by the same unique dialects they use to identify each other.
This is the A5N9 call.
He also studies visual identifying features. And on the day primetime came along, he spotted a familiar family.
That's A27.
It's A27. Now tell me what that means.
A27 is Corky's brother.
Really?
And Corky's mother and Corky's 2 brothers and sister are right over there.
Now how can you know that just from seeing a few dorsal fins come up?
Oh, well, the shape of the dorsal fins and the makeup of the group, really. You know, this is Freshwater Bay, just we're coming up to where the halfway house will be.
Spong's proposal to return a killer whale to her family has never been done before. A series of nets would be strung across Freshwater Bay, converting it into a kind of halfway house for Corky.
When we bring her back, she'll be in that halfway house, probably for a period of months, learning how to catch fish again and gradually readapting to the ocean. But part of it will be listening to the sounds of the whales as they pass by. In the meantime, we'd be watching what the other whales are doing. You can see what happens. They swim right by here.
What if they didn't accept her? Is there a possibility of that?
We wouldn't let her go until we knew what was happening.
And even then, Corky may be free, but not entirely.
You know, we thought, for example, that it would be possible to have Corky carry a camera underneath the water and in the middle of that group, getting this gorgeous imagery of what it is actually like to be a whale in that pod.
SeaWorld curator Jim Antrim says Spong's entire proposal lacks scientific validity, especially the plan to use Corky as a photographer.
If Corky hadn't seen any of her family members in 24 years and came swimming out with all this electronic gear on, do you think that would make them more inclined to accept her? I doubt it.
I think that they're afraid that if Corky goes back home, then people are going to realize these orca have families and they can go back to them. And they're going to start calling for more and more of the captives to be returned. And that, of course, would threaten SeaWorld and Anheuser-Busch's huge billion-dollar business.
The reason that SeaWorld won't release Corky is as a direct threat to her life. We're not willing to risk her life on an unfounded or speculative experiment. It has nothing to do with money at all.
One of the arguments against releasing Corky into the wild is that she may no longer be an effective hunter. Evidence of that? Her teeth are no longer what they used to be. With age, they've been ground down, especially the ones in the front, which are for hunting.
Well, how do they know? You know, she's still an animal with incredibly powerful jaws. She's agile, fast. She's very capable of catching fish, I think.
Paul's a good guy. I like him. He's a nice guy. He's got a good heart. But there's a blind spot when it comes to Corky.
Gail Lawley was Corky's trainer for almost 5 years. She believes Spong's plan is dangerously misguided.
And fundamentally, it's a fairy tale. It's a wonderful, lovely story about an animal returning to her home in the wild, and it's a fairy tale. Everything that he has based on her ability to reacclimate to that situation is not based in reality.
But the debate is bigger than Corky. It goes to the heart of whether it is ethical to keep any of these animals in captivity to provide entertainment for tourists. Parks like SeaWorld defend the practice as educational, saying millions of people learn about the killer whales who would otherwise never have a chance to see them in the wild. Not everyone's buying that argument.
We are teaching our children by this action it's okay to abuse nature, as long as we call it research or education. We bastardize the definition of education.
They call it flipper, faster than lightning.
Rick O'Barry was once the trainer for Flipper, the television dolphin. But now he works for the release of marine mammals. O'Barry says neither education nor entertainment nor economics can justify keeping those animals in captivity.
When you capture them and drag them kicking and screaming into that concrete chlorinated box, you take away from them the two most important aspects of their life, the world of sound and their family.
Some concrete chlorinated boxes are worse than others. Meet Keiko, the killer whale who played the part of Willie in the film. He lives amid the wild rides of Mexico's largest amusement park, thousands of miles from his Icelandic home. Keiko is noticeably lethargic, the result of living in a too small tank filled with too warm water. Keiko also suffers from a skin disease and a drooping dorsal fin that seems to betray his weariness. Park owner Oscar Porter knows Keiko has outgrown his tank, but has no immediate plans to remedy the situation.
If Keiko leaves the park, I mean, we are going to lose a tremendous attraction.
SeaWorld, which has much larger tanks, claims to have the most natural environment possible. and a regimen of tricks that they say keeps the orcas mentally and physically fit by imitating the behavior of wild orcas.
If you watch the Shamu show today, you'll notice we talked about their being fearsome predators. The animals swam around the perimeter of the tank with their teeth displayed, things like that. So what we're trying to do is put these animals in their natural perspective.
That is not SeaWorld. That's a concrete box full of chlorinated water. This is SeaWorld.
Meanwhile, in his continuing effort to gather evidence supporting the release of Corky, Paul Spong asked SeaWorld for a chance to play a tape of Corky's family to prove that she can still understand their language. His request was denied. But we were curious, so we also asked to play the tape for Corky.
Could we try that?
I don't think we want to do this.
We don't want to do that? You don't want to do that?
Well, I mean...
Eventually, we were given permission, and Corky heard the voices of her family for the first time in nearly 24 years. The SeaWorld orcas all respond to the tape. At one point, Corky begins to shudder. That's her in the back. But it's impossible to know if she's reacting to what she hears. In fact, much of what we know about killer whales is speculation. The scientific study of these powerful creatures is still in its infancy. With so little to go on, says SeaWorld, they are not willing to risk Corky's life.
We looked at it from the standpoint of, was it the right thing for Corky, and definitely came to the conclusion it wasn't.
You know, my basic comment is, how do they know?
But then they say, how do you know?
We don't. It's an experiment, you know, and I think Corky deserves a chance, and let's find out.
But time is running out, says Spong, to make a decision. 28-year-old Corky is nearing the maximum age for killer whales in captivity. Every day the debate continues, he says, is a day lost for Corky and her family.
And what about Keiko, the star of Free Willy? He's an Icelandic killer whale, and the whereabouts of his family are unknown. So unlike the fictional Willy, Keiko cannot be returned to his home waters. Ironically, the orca that helped fuel this debate will live the rest of his life in captivity.